Hello, this is Jove Aguas, and welcome to my lectures in Theories on Knowledge. This is now the third part of my lecture on the Oriental theories of or on knowledge. And in this third part, I will be discussing about Taoism, the uh, nature or notion of reality according to Taoism. So I will be dividing my discussion into three parts. First, I will talk about the Tao and the invariable laws. And then I will discuss the Yin-Yang, and the last part will be about the Wu-wei theory and the De, or the virtue of De. So first, the founder of Daoism, one of the oldest philosophies from China, is Lao Tzu, okay, the legendary Lao Tzu. Of course, there are other proponents of Taoism. We have Chuang Tzu and Yang Tzu. And the main doctrines of Taoism are contained in the book Tao-Te-Ching, which is attributed to Lao Tzu. Now, Lao Tzu, instead of presenting an elaborate philosophical system, he struggled or he tried to express a sense of the ultimate underlying great principle, the rule, the ultimate rule, the cause of the way of all things. And this identified as the Tao. Lao Tzu's vision of reality is that reality is holistic and it encompasses the totality of the cosmos, the totality of what of the universe. And when we try to view, or if we view the universe or reality holistically, the universe expresses harmony, purpose, order, and calm power. But when we try to separate things, when we try to distinguish things, just to understand the parts without understanding the whole, then the results are errors, suffering, and chaos and unhappiness. Okay? So we have to view reality as a whole, holistically. Okay? Now, the doctrines of Taoism is represented according to its three phases. The first is the preservation of life and avoidance of injury. The second is the discovery of the laws underlying the changes of things in the universe. And the third one is transcendence of the world. This transcendence of the world doesn't mean that we have to exist in a separate dimension or realm. It simply means seeing things from a higher perspective or a higher point of view. Okay, so let's now talk about the Tao and the invariables. Uh, the term Tao may have several meanings. The first one is that it is the primordial principle from which all things emanate and which underlies all that is. So, in this notion, the Tao could be likened to, can be likened to the notion of Brahman. Okay, the notion of Brahman in Hinduism, okay? Or the logos of the Greeks. Okay? Now, the second conception is that the Tao is that which operates in all that is, which provides the natural way of being and acting. And then the third is that which provides the norm of morality. The Tao becomes the basis of ethics or the basis of ethical conduct in this sense. Now, Lao Tzu observes that although things are ever changeable, constantly changing, the laws that govern them are not changeable. They are permanent. They remain the same. So he calls these laws the invariables. These are the laws that govern that all the changes of things. One example of this invariable is the law of reversion. It says that when a thing reaches its extreme, it reverts. So when something reaches its height, the natural tendency or the natural thing to follow is that it will go to its opposite. Okay, or if it is the highest, then it will go to its lowest point, and then when it reaches its lowest point, then it will again go back to the highest point. So you go to the farthest right. If it reaches that extreme, then it will go to the farthest left. So that's the law of reversion. Okay, and to know these invariables is to be enlightened. Okay, they are to be enlightened. When we understand these invariables, we become enlightened. Okay, so uh, in the Tao-Te-Ching, Lao Tzu writes, reversion is the action of the Tao. And he also says, and I quote again, functioning everywhere means far reaching, and far reaching means returning to the original point. So the point there is that this is the original point, or this is the original point. You go up and reaches the extreme height, then it will go down again to its original point. So the idea is if something or anything develops certain extreme qualities, those qualities invariably revert to become their opposite. Too much wealth will revert to poverty, and too much power or strength will revert to weakness. Conversely, too much ignorance will revert to knowledge. All right. So to resist this rule or process would be to go against the law of nature. The opposites are not uh, the opposite are not mutually causal. Of course, all right. It does not, like for example, wealth does not cause poverty, or ignorance does not cause knowledge. So they are merely relative value in comparison with one another. So, for example, when you talk of beauty, beauty has meaning only in its relation to its opposite, which is ugliness. And the same is true with good and evil, okay? Difficult and easy, and other opposites. Okay, the good does not cause evil, and vice versa. Okay, they are merely relative in terms of value. Okay, so the good and the bad, the difficult and easy, beauty and ugliness, ignorance and knowledge, they are existing in an everlasting exchange, constant reversion. Okay, and we cannot say that one is better or good than the other because, for example, when you take rain, well, rain is good in time of drought and it will be bad in times of flood. So relative, relative opposite. Now, according to Lao Tzu, this relationship may seem rather paradoxical for ordinary people. Okay, it may seem paradoxical, but if we understand the fundamental law of nature, we are properly guided as to how we can uh, follow nature, okay, follow the way of the Tao. To the ordinary people who have no idea of this law, they actually may seem very ironic, very impossible. But Lao Tzu says, when the highest type of men hear the Tao, they diligently practice it. But when the average type of man hear the Tao, they merely believe it, while the lowest type of man, when they hear the Tao, they just laugh at it. So to know the invariable is to be enlightened, to be free from prejudices, to be generous towards things, okay? To be natural, to be spontaneous, okay? Not to oppose or not to destroy nature. And the man who comprehends the invariable and relies on these invariables for his action, he does not follow his own partial opinion, therefore, without any prejudice, simply follows the way of the Tao. Okay? Because according to Lao Tzu, the Tao is the all pervading and unfailing principle that man, that the man who comprehends, relies on it. Okay? And therefore, when you rely on something that is pervading and unfailing, then you will also become pervading and unfailing. Okay? So here we associate these invariables, the law of the Tao, the laws of the invariables, with spontaneity, with creativity, with freedom, with naturalness, as opposed to being selfish, okay, as opposed to being, you know, rude, as opposed to being artificial. So the Tao is always associated with what is natural and what is simple. Okay, now of course, really the Tao is difficult to express and it's difficult to understand, at least even from a philosophical perspective or point of view. No? In the Tao-Te-Ching, we can read the lines. The Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. How do you interpret Tao? If we go back to the interpretation of the two truth or two theories in Buddhism, maybe we can have some kind of an analogy, because the Tao cannot be, you know, cannot be expressed. It cannot be said in words like the absolute reality, okay, the absolute reality or the ultimate reality of Taoism. When we try to express everything in words, in concepts, then what we get is just a relative or conventional truth or conventional reality. Okay, so that's it. No, some kind of a similarity between uh, the notion of reality in Buddhism and in Taoism. So the word Tao, as we've said, it is the way. Now, in many traditions, just to further explain this notion of Tao, in many traditions, the Tao denotes the way of man or an outline of moral behavior, as we have mentioned, that the Tao becomes a rule of morality, some kind of a norm of morality. And uh, in this sense, we can also relate the Tao as it is used, or this morality as it is used in Western philosophical or religious traditions. But of course, in Taoism, it has a distinct metaphysical meaning. As we've said, it is the all embracing origin of all things, the first principle from which all the appearances arise, the ground of all beings, the underlying reality that sustains the universe and makes possible its ongoing existence, activity, etc. So we cannot see the Tao, for it is not manifested in the senses, but without the Tao, we would be of no consciousness of anything. We will not be conscious of anything. So, um, as I've said, it can be loosely compared to the notion of the logos of the Greeks, or the concept of Hindu or Brahman in Hinduism, and uh, what else? It could be the Elan Vital, or it could be the Geist, etc., etc. Right? So there are many other concepts that we can think as being related or similar to Taoism. But of course, Uh, in Daoism, it has its own distinct meaning. Okay, so uh, let's talk now about the yin and the yang. If the Tao is the one, because that's the first principle, then the two, so the Tao is the one, then there is also the two. The two refers to the twin forces of yin and yang. The whole of nature consists of the continual interaction of these two opposing forces: yin, the passive element, and the yang, the active element. The yin may be seen as weak, as negative, dark, destructive, while the yang, as compared to the yin, may be strong, positive, light, and constructive. But remember that this weak and strong, negative and positive, dark and light, destructive, constructive are merely relative opposites. Okay? How dark is dark, it depends on what you could consider to be bright. Okay? So the yin and the yang are always thought of together. They are always, you know, they are always together because they are expressions, uh, they are expressions of the opposite. Okay? So, for example, when you think of, say, strong, well, the strong can only be considered in terms of what is weak. So the two, the yin and the yang, are always joined together. They operate together in a never-ending cycle of coming together, falling apart, like, for example, in the case of birth, death, wet, dry, day, night, there's good, evil, male, female, full, empty, knowledge, ignorance, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the most traditional view is that the yin represents the aspects of the feminine, being soft, being cool, being calm, what else? Introspective, uh, healing, while the yang may be interpreted as representing the masculine qualities of being hard, hot, energetic, what else? Uh, moving, aggressive. Okay, so but again, these are relational, relative opposites. Now, another view refers to the yin as representing night and yang representing day. Yin is soft and passive, yang is hard and energetic. Okay, so these are just merely uh, relative opposites. So this ceaseless interplay is manifested even in the natural order of things. Okay, things therefore cannot be understood separate from each other. Everything is part of a seamless cycle. Okay, a seamless cycle. If you can imagine the 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 image of the yin and the yang. Okay, the circle, and then there is a division, a curve. Right, of course you know that. Okay, so that's a good example of the. Of course, you can look at the image, the representation of the symbol rather of the yin and the yang. So the wise person realizes that nothing is absolutely permanent. That's one implication of this. That nothing is permanent. That conditions call up opposite conditions. Okay, and that the bad, the on the other side of the bad is the good. That today's unfortunate circumstances, for example, will change into something good in the future. Remember the law of reversion. There's always a balance of opposites in the universe. And when all elements are equally present, then there is calm. But when one thing outweighs the other, then there is confusion and chaos. So the thing is, we have to maintain a kind of a relative equilibrium. Okay. Now, related to this yin and yang is the notion of relative opposites, which I have already been mentioning. Taoism believes that if there is one thing in ultimate absolute in reality is that one way is the way things. Sorry, uh, let me repeat that. Uh, if there is one ultimate reality, one. Okay, so now let's go to another a related concept here, and that is the union of relative opposites. Taoism believes that if there is one ultimate reality, it's that there are no strict distinctions, no, between or among things. That distinctions are just arbitrary and misleading. Nothing can be purely matter or purely spirit. Nothing is completely female or male or bad or good, bright or dark. The good and the bad both exist in an everlasting exchange. Again, I already mentioned the example of rain. We cannot say rain is totally good or totally bad because during drought, rain is good. And when it's time of flooding, we don't want rain, right? So even in flux, we can see the working of the great Tao, which can be studied in nature and through calm contemplation. The chaos and disorder that we see in things, are only apparent, and they are interpretations and judgment from limited perspective. The wise recognizes the working of the Tao and embraces the yin and the yang and the relative opposition. Okay? So that's the lesson we can get from this uh, notion of the yin and the yang. Now let's go to the third and last part of this discussion, and that is the Wu-wei theory, or the doctrine of inaction, and the De, which means virtue or power. Lao Tzu's period during his time, it was time of political and social, turmoil in response to the chaos and disorder of his time. I will talk about this chaos and the changing of the social order in the next lecture when I discuss Confucianism. Okay. So, because of this chaos and disorder during his time, he formulated the doctrine of non-action, or the Wu-wei theory, the theory of non-action, which means doing nothing, doing things by doing nothing. So, literally, Wu-wei is without action, no activity. Okay. Well, of course, it may really sound very paradoxical. In fact, it is a paradox because uh, literally, wei wu wei, meaning action without action. How could there be action without action? It's not just paradoxical, it sounds very contradictory. Okay. But how do we interpret this notion of the wu wei? The practice of the wu wei and the efficacy of the wu wei are fundamental tenets in Daoism, no, and in Chinese thought in general. And the Wu-wei theory is an offshoot of the general theory of reversal. Remember one of the uh, invariables, okay, which is the movement of the Tao. According to this, uh, to the Wu-wei, everything in the universe originated from the ultimate Wu, or nothing. Nothing should not be interpreted as absence or privation, okay, like in the Western sense, but rather as the unnamed or the invisible. And the unnamed and the invisible, as we have already mentioned, is the Tao. Okay, the Tao is the unnamed, and it acts by non-acting. What do you mean by that? The Tao acts by non-acting. Uh, Although the Wu-wei theory, as we've already said, is translated as having no activity, it does not actually mean total or absolute absence of activity or doing nothing. Wu-wei is interpreted as lesser activity or doing less or acting without artificiality or arbitrariness. So that means that the goal of the Wu-wei is to follow the Tao, because the Tao has its own natural, simple way. And it is the goal of the Wu Wei to achieve this state of perfect equilibrium or alignment with the Tao, that we stay in the middle. Well, you cannot say the middle path, but it's a kind of equilibrium, okay, revealing the soft and the invisible power within all the things within the universe. Okay, so when we understand the Tao and when we apply the Wu Wei theory, we practice the Wu Wei, then we are going to obtain an irresistible, soft, and invisible power or virtue. Okay? Because there are many different interpretations of power or virtue. You can apply power in terms of the natural things. Like, for example, one example of this natural power is manifested by water. Okay? Water is soft. You cannot really see its strength, but it is able to carve out, rocks, the rivers, the river banks, and so on and so forth, and look at the power of water uh, when floods, happen. So it has its soft, invisible power, and it just moves so calmly, but it is able to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. Okay, so such interpretation of the Wu Wei may be rather again paradoxical, because how can we achieve something by doing nothing or by doing less? But the idea is that we must do things without excess, and we have to follow nature. We have to follow the natural way. Okay, Wu Wei is telling us that things are accomplished when done naturally. That is without artificiality. So if one has too much of activities, then they become harmful rather than good. And the purpose of doing something is to have something done or accomplished. But if we are overdoing something, if there is excess in our activity, then we do not accomplish anything. Okay? The worst is we do not accomplish anything at all. We don't finish anything at all. One famous story, a Chinese story, describes uh, this story of two boys who were told to draw a snake. Okay, so they were told to draw a snake. The first one finished. The first one to finish will win. Oh, the first one to finish to draw a snake will win. Now, the first boy was so fast, so quick in drawing the snake that he finished much ahead of the second boy. But when he saw the other boy was still, struggling with his drawing, he decided to add some things to the drawing of the snake. So he put legs and he put wings on the snake. And then when the time is up, they both submitted their drawings. And although he finished early, but he lost the contest because a snake does not have legs or wings. So he overdid. I mean, there's an excess. He overdid the whole thing, and he did not follow what was natural. Okay, so we have to follow the Wu-wei, because the universe works harmoniously according to its own ways. And when we exert our will against the world, against reality, we disrupt its harmony. So the way of the Tao is the natural way. Its nature, uh, meaning we have to follow its nature, because when we follow its nature or the natural way, then we accomplish everything. Now, in the process of coming to be, each individual thing obtains its own, its own universal Tao. This universal Tao, this universal power is called the De. The nature of a thing is its De, meaning its power or virtue. So the De is the Tao revealed in the world of phenomena. And together with the virtue that this power brings in anyone or in anything that follows the way. So virtue is being genuine, being true to one's own nature, avoiding artificiality, avoiding uh, excess, avoiding pretense. It simply means being spontaneous, being creative, being natural, you know, uh, following the law of nature. And the sage understands this. Okay, the sage understands this, and he follows the way of the Tao. He understands Wu Wei. Okay, he understands the relation, the opposites, the relative opposites of the Yin and the Yang. So, and then of course he attains a perfect equilibrium. He is aligned with the Tao. Okay, so that's the notion of reality according to Taoism. Thank you very much for listening, and good day.